Let's be honest, grades have always carried weight. For many students, they're seen as a measure of intelligence, discipline, and even future success. What do those grades actually say about you? Do they reflect how you think, how you solve problems? Or are they simply one part of a much bigger picture? I'm Megan.
And I'm Nandana.
Joining us today are two experts who bring both academic and industry perspectives. Prof. Gino, Miss Jade, welcome to Unmute. It's great to have the both of you here. Maybe we can start with a quick hello for our audience.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having us today.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to have this conversation with Nandana, Megan, and Miss Jade.
Thank you. We're really glad to have both of you here today.
So let's get to what we're actually going to dive deeper in today. So, students that are going through this current time period are navigating more options, more expectations, and more uncertainty and pressure than ever before. So, it really brings it back to the question of, in all of this, where do grades really fit? Prof. Gino, I think you'd have a lot of insight on how grades fit into a student's daily life. So, we can start from the foundations of it.
Okay, that's a really good question, and I think it will be a recurring topic in this conversation that grades do matter, right? But to what extent? I think that's the thing. Maybe I can start with differentiating advantages of having good grades uh, uh, versus is it really required, right? So I would like to start with the idea that grades do matter because it will give you opportunities, right? So um, to be upfront, right? To be candid with everyone. When I was a student, I was a really bad student, right? I had low grades because of certain circumstances. Um, and what I learned in my own experiences and in my history of teaching, both in undergrad and in the master's program, is that good grades allow you to have more opportunities. So companies, especially for entry level positions, companies do still look at grades in terms of what is your capability, what is your uh, discipline, right? And they use it as a basis of essentially as a barrier of entry, right? But on the other side of the spectrum, I would like to caution people that high grades doesn't ensure success, right? So it allows you to open doors for different opportunities, but it doesn't ensure good positions, right? So maybe that's something that Jade can expound on later. Right? So I think that's the thesis of the podcast. I don't know if you agree, Jade.
Thanks, Prof. Gina. I actually agree when it comes to the barriers for entry because we know that certain positions are quite limited and there are really like a big pool of applications, not just locally, but more so now that in a global scale, a lot of talent are competing against each other. So it's a good way to kind of like in the olden times, it's also their way to reduce applicant volume, you could say. But at this point in time, the opportunities that do open are mainly also because organizations or employers see the onset of discipline that students may have when it comes to making sure that they adhere to the, as anyone who gets into any organization, we're entering some kind of a structure here. So even that at the most foundational level, to have gone through a certain structural foundation and even proven performance within that particular structural foundation is an indicator for organizations or employers of repetitive success within getting into an organization. Yes.
So, do you think that the two of you think that current grade systems, especially here in the Philippines, where it's very, it's very diverse across the different universities, are still aligned with the skills that students need today to thrive in the current job market?
That's a good question, but I think it's tricky because when we talk about the grade system, there are a lot of grade systems here in the Philippines. You have your letter grade systems, you have your percentile grade systems, and in terms of the passing grade, it also varies from institution to institution, right? Especially here, for example, here at AIM, when I entered in 2017, the passing grade was 80%. Right? Imagine if your classes right now has a passing grade of 80%, right? And we shifted that to adapt to not on the grade system itself, but adapt it based on the assessments, based on how assessments are evolving. Right? So to expound on this one, for example, before we have assessments on essays, we have assessments on written exams, hands-on exams, take-home exams, but what came out recently, right? You have your large language models, you have your generative AI. So, meaning as an educator, we need to adapt in terms of how we create our assessments. So, because essays, for example, wouldn't work anymore. Take home essays, at least, wouldn't work that much anymore. Why? Because some students would take the easy route or the shortcut in terms of generating all of this using large language models, using generative AI. So rather than looking at the grade systems, I think we need to look at how we really explore or test our students' competence and learning outcomes, and then the grade will follow. So, so that's why right now, in some of our classes, we shifted into more experiential assessments, like for example, project presentations, oral exams. We're going back to pen and paper exams. Why? Because it really tests our students' understanding of the topics.
Wow, that was a lot. I think it's just my biggest question is that when we now that you've said that that we are adapting our assessments to fit what students really need to know with the introduction of generative AI. Where do you see that grades succeed as a sign of potential? What are you looking for now in a student when they are accomplished academically? I mean, it's not the same anymore, right? If they know a lot of things, it's how they perform, it's how they adapt. So, is that what you are looking for in a student these days, Prof?
Definitely. So this is why these alternative assessments come in. Yes, of course, we still test the fundamentals in terms of how you understand the lectures, how you understand the lessons. Uh, for example, do you know definitions? But more than that, uh, we look at how will you be able to apply it. Right? So that's where some of the assessments come in. So this, as Jade mentioned a while ago, the grades itself doesn't just measure your understanding of the subject, but it also measures discipline. And this is something that some students sometimes forget, right? So they're just complying just so that they can get good grades or just because it's required, but they fail to realize that it's also a training in terms of how they approach problems, how they approach their own time management, right? Because it tests how will you prioritize things, right? How much time will you allot in certain works, right? In certain subjects. So the grades is not, it is a measure of how much you understand the classroom learnings, but it's also a measure of your discipline. Jade maybe would like to
Yes,
add.
it's a reflection of that. And particularly also because we know how organizations, especially the more competitive ones, also expect quite competitive talents to join so that
Yes.
it keeps them revving up for what's the next big thing, for anticipating any risk factors in the future. So, students who in their studies display some kind of being able to forecast things and anticipate and being also quite um, like because it also reflects some sort of like teamwork if you're having good grades, right? Because you're achieving this alongside other people. You're studying alongside other people, and oftentimes you get group with other people, and that also gets reflected in the types of grades you as a team get, you as a learning team get, as a class get, etc. So it's a really good like first window to the world of work when organizations, recruiters see that students are able to perform well during their undergrads reflected through the grades that they are able to get. And alongside the balancing act of the time management, you have so many clubs, you have so many side projects that you also initiate yourselves or you get yourselves involved in. So all of these combined help recruiters to really look at high potentials.
Mm.
And if students, especially our pioneer ones from AIM, would be able to get into high potential programs, which are typically your management trainee programs, then that's a very good indicator that it's because they're able to reflect these at the onset during their recruitment stage. The good grades are a high indicator of that. And
Maybe I can add to what Jade mentioned. Having high grades and still having a good track record of extracurricular activities,
Yes.
that's a really good indicator of success, a successful student.
Mm.
Why? Because you know that they know how to properly manage themselves, right? Being able to enjoy themselves, but while also being able to deliver well in their classroom, right? It's something that employers really do look out for.
handle stress.
Handle stress as well. Right? How do
Yes.
they handle stress?
So we got an academic perspective and we also got your perspective, Ms. Jade. But when in your career would looking at the grades really matter? Is it in the beginning or does it continue even as you continue to climb the corporate ladder, so to speak?
From experience, definitely at the start, it is very important, right?
I second the
Uh,
motion.
yeah. Because you don't have any, well, at least for you guys, it's good that you have your internship. But for other students, they don't have any internship experiences. So companies really have to rely on the grades as a initial barrier that we've been talking about. Right? Then after that, of course, you have your interview process. You have other exams that you'll be taking, but having good grades is very, very important at the start of your career. So the second part of that question is, will it matter down the line, right? And the thing is, it will still matter, right? It will still matter. Why? Because not directly, but the fact that you have had good grades, again, will ensure that you are also trained in terms of how you properly manage stress, right? How you properly manage your time. So in that case, sometimes companies just look at your industry experience, right? They don't even bother looking at your TOR anymore. But I've seen companies looking at grades as an a factor for career progression. When I say career progression, in terms of their possible races, right? There is one industry that we're working in finance where they sent in their students in the master's program, and the salary that they will get, the salary increase they will get depends on what grade did they get in the master's program.
Wow.
Yes, there are certain companies that still rely on grades.
I would agree to that as well. Not all industries, we would say, but certain industries, for example, consulting firms, very much so, banking and finance types of firms, they really ask for grades still, even at the master's level. So, and as I mentioned, because this is part of their kind of quick volume reduction from all applications, but at the same time, making sure that they get the creme of the crop, you could say, particular to certain talents in certain institutions, that they would eventually also make to compete within their organization, because that brings out the best in every organization. So they ask for grades, and it forms part of their kind of like initial screening. So if you've already gained some experience from after your undergrad, being admitted to a particular company, then later on, if you do pursue your graduate studies, and if you do want to get into certain industries, then making sure that the grades are quite aligned in a way shows that there's consistency also in performance in that way.
I would also like to add to what Jade mentioned regarding the industry specific requirements. There are industries where they really value academic rigor. Like, for example, for us in the academic space, right? There is a high premium on honor students, right?
Yes.
There is a premium on degree holders in master's, PhD, right? So in that sense, the grades still matter, right? uh, being introduced as, for example, an honor student, as a laude, someone who has Latin honors, uh, will put that certain edge over others. Right? Although it's not all, it certainly gives a really good first impression.
So you'd like to say that it sets off a chain reaction for what your future looks like?
Definitely. If there is something that I would like to change about my past, I would like to be a better student, right?
Yes.
Uh, because although I'm privileged enough to be where I am right now, I think it would have been an easier journey if I was a better student, right? If I had better grades, like even in my early years as an educator, when I applied as an instructor, I was actually rejected. Right? Yeah, during my first job applications, I was rejected, even though some of the professors know me as a student because my grade didn't reflect it. Those who are not familiar with me aren't confident about my skill set, right? So the grades really is a marker of who you are in that initial stage, right? So I wasn't hired as an instructor. Uh, so I really worked hard for my masters in terms of bringing my grades up, right? That way I can prove to other people, at least at the initial stage, again, repeating at the initial stage of review, that you have the capability. At least you meet the minimum requirements.
Just to add a little more, it's also about standard setting. And we'd always have to keep in mind that even if we're good as an institution, or that we think we're good as a combined transnational institution as well, there will still be competition out
Yes.
there. And so, what are their standards for their particular, say, types of graduates that come out of them? And even those that we consider to be our peers, and more so our like top 10 in this kind of field we're in. We're very lucky to be kind of like the a first in a lot of things, particularly also to this transnational undergraduate program. But we having to think about our competition, that kind of like sets the tone too, as to whether we have to improve the grades we're having, because we might be good where we are when we think about it, but against our competitors, where are we? So it kind of like helps in that sense for organizations to be convinced that this pioneer graduates from us will actually be world standard. So that excites me as a career services professional.
One thing that's like I noticed about, AIM once I joined it as an undergraduate student is that there's a lot of opportunities here for, innovation and creativity.
What would you say differentiates a top student on paper from somebody that can actually perform like a top student in practice?
That's also a good question. And this is actually more of a challenge to the professor than you as students, right? So this is where our assessment design would come in, right? It's very hard, right? Creating your exams, creating your tests is very hard because it's a matter of balancing. Are you actually creating good assessments for the actual learning outcomes that you require from the specific course that you're teaching, right? So, for example, for us, this is why, if you notice, we have different grading criteria. In AIM, actually, we're required to have at least three types of assessments. the professors are required to give class participation as a grade component, and then you have an exam, and sometimes we include project presentations because that tests how holistic you are in terms of your understanding of the different learning outcomes. So in that sense, we're proud of that at AIM that our learning, our assessment styles already is a good indicator of good students, right? But also, although there are certain times where, for example, a specific course just focuses too much on exam, where it fails to test students' understanding in terms of application. On the other hand, there are certain courses where we focus too much on the application, where we sometimes forget the fundamentals, right? So the grades is a good indicator of how successful a student will be if uh, the learning style, the assessment design is created well. Okay, which brings me back to the point as an educator. Now I put my hat on as a professor, not as an hirer. Uh, this assessments, at the end of the day, think about it. Why are we creating these assessments? Not because we just want a grade out of you, right? The purpose of this assessment is we really want to test your competencies, right? We really want to test your understanding. So that's why sometimes asking for extra points or partial points is counterproductive. Why? Because you might not have learned the core learning competencies that is required for that course, and you just passed because you have partial points, right? Your grade was curved. Okay, so it's a balance for us. It's a challenging balance for us professor of being kind enough to give opportunities to students, but also being fair in the sense that you'll get what your money is worth in a sense. Like you'll really learn um, about the course that you're trying to achieve.
To add to the baseline competencies, I can see that it's also a very good level playing field for students, and to be able to exercise also their ethics because they all try to like learn at the same time, maybe have different learning styles. That's undeniable, but at the same time, when you already execute what is being asked of you, if you're able to kind of meet the expectations of the professors when they set a certain standard, and do it in an ethical manner as well, that's a very I could say it's very impressive for me. If I were to also wear my recruiter hat back in the day, to see such efforts go through, what such efforts go through a student to be able to complete something of value for them.
Good point on that one, Jade, on ethics. So this is also where honesty would come in, right? And the thing about this conversation is that you're going to be pretty much disadvantaged if you take the easy way out in terms of these assessments. I think this ties back to your question. Are grades a good sign? Yes. But if this grade, the way you got these grades isn't honest, right? It will have a disadvantage on you. Why? Because once you go into the real world, once you go into these companies and you fake your way out of getting good grades, it will be very much difficult for you, right? So, so being honest about, being transparent about your work, being able to really use your grade as a way to gauge yourself in terms of how much you understand, right, is a good practice. Like I myself, for example, I really don't understand a certain topic, right? I'd take the hit, right? I'd take the hit of getting a low score. Why? Because it's a signal that, oh, okay, I need to improve on this specific aspect. I need to improve on this specific topic. Like for example, I saw an answer key online, right, for the specific assessment. I can copy that into my work. But the thing is, I didn't learn, right? And that will give me a disadvantage in the future. Why? Because I didn't fire those neurons. I didn't make the required connections to really understand the topic, right? So, in a sense, it's also a challenge to the students. It's also a call to action to the students to really use your grade as an indicator of how much you learned yourself, right? So, don't just try to achieve high grades because of the merits, because of the Latin honors, because of the degrees, but also really use it to test your understanding.
I do have a question that builds on the previous question. So, obviously, we discussed how you can determine whether our students are good in practice and on paper because that's how you, as professors at AIM, structure your assessments. But what about in institutions, say around the world, where that is not how it's structured? Where it is structured simply to get that degree with no real learning in mind. At that point, where does the conversation of do grades really matter come into place?
It's a hard question to answer. I think I can answer this. Maybe Jade also can answer this as as an employer, because here at AIM we do hire staff from other institutions. We do hire staff, faculty from other places, right, from other organizations. So it's a challenge for us as as the hiring organizations to test. The thing about other institutions and how they create their assessments, we can't do anything about that, right? If it's a degree mill, right? If they just churn out students, that's on them, right? So now it's a challenge on us on how do we create assessments that will really get the most out of the employees that are applying to us, right? So for us, for some companies in the data science space, maybe we can use that as an example. Aside from the grades themselves, we do have exams, right? That's one of the biggest barriers in terms of being hired for a company. So you have exams, you have different types of exams. You have a technical exam, you have an application exam, and then you have several interview processes. So, meaning if you didn't earn your degree or if you didn't earn your grade, meaning you got a high grade just because it's easy, the course is easy, the faculty is nice, you will have a hard time getting into this organization.
Traditional, classic, and also legend kinds of organizations already recognize what schools or universities are of a particular that produce certain standard students. So it's no competition if they were to be compared to what we produce, right? So I think there's value in that, and in the year on year types of talents that we produce. That's why we try to maintain this certain standard, if not continue to improve it. Uh, I'm very, very impressed by how AIM onboards its undergraduate students with the type of assessments very earlier on, even that, right? Looking out for certain senior high schools and to bring you in here, and that those developments happen in a very fast-paced manner, and that you're still able to adapt regardless of how busy it is, and that you'll end up, getting into these organizations, and all the more challenges will be there, but you're ready for it because of the rigor of your grades for every term, and everything that you churn out in your projects, in your club works, and everything in balancing it all together, and having that AIM name to it means that you're already, by being here, already well networked as well, with all the leaders that have gone before, who have graduated from this institution and are now leading societies and businesses globally.
That's also the reason why we have the AACSB accreditation, right? This accreditation allows uh, institutions to have that credibility of being able to produce students that who are on par with the standards, if not more.
In AIM specifically, I would say that the BSD-SBA program is a very academically competitive environment. There really is no other way to get around it. And while I am proud of that in a certain aspect because it pushes all of us to become better, it can also create a toxic culture at times. So how do you, as an academic program director, and you as someone who is seeing these students come into the career field, deal with those kinds of personalities and those people that have had to endure that kind of perspective?
That's a really good question, Megan. And it's challenging, actually. Uh, so you have two perspectives regarding this one. And not two perspectives, you have two classic cases that I typically encounter. Either one, a student who is already performing really well, but still insists on getting that last few points. And then you have students who are average, but is getting pressured because of this academic competitiveness, right? So, in that sense, I have different advices based on where you are in the spectrum, right? For those students who really stress out in terms of the last few points, right? I ask them, why are you trying to chase this, right? At the end of the day, you have to understand the reason why are you trying to chase this, right? Because some students rely on these grades in terms of financial support, right? In terms of scholarship. So it matters. Under certain privileges or uh, for under certain conditions where some students are not privileged enough, right? They would use this high grades as an anchor to get better opportunities in the future, right? So in that case, that makes sense, right? But there are also students who uh, are already perfect, right? Let's say they already get a good enough grade, but they would argue to get that final bit of score or bump in their percentage, and then I would ask them, how much is it worth for you? Because there are unintended consequences regarding how you chase this. What do I mean by this one? There are certain times where professors becomes more strict just because a student is asking for more points. So rather than getting more points, what happens is that professors become more critical in succeeding assessments, right? So it kind of gets counterproductive. It has a different effect regarding what you originally intended, right? So I advise students to be careful of how do you chase these additional points, right? So to give a tip for some of the students out there who are listening, like for example, you're asking for an additional bump. Some students would go about it directly. Prof, can you give me additional points? And that's a bit off-putting for me as a faculty, right? So rather, it's a trick. That, what I see is that what I prefer is for students to approach me, Prof, is there any way that I can improve my assessments, my output, and be able to recompute my scores based on this additional effort or additional improvements that that I've added into my output, right? Because it's number one, you're not directly asking for a grade, so it's not off-putting. Number two, it shows initiative as well, right? It shows initiative that you are willing to learn, you are willing to understand what is lacking, right? What are your gaps in terms of your understanding, right? On the other side, for students who get pressured, it's a simple idea. Don't compare yourself with others, right? You have your own journey and focus on how you will improve yourself, right? And focus on how you will improve yourself, how you will learn all of this lessons that is being bombarded to you, right?
Yes.
And I've seen several students who has this problem, right? Asking, "Oh, prof, it's pressuring to have these classmates, right, who are performing really well." And I tell them that you should actually use that as an inspiration or as an encouragement to be better rather than comparing yourself and putting yourself down
Yeah.
because you're not performing as well. You have to accept the fact that students have different learning curves, right? And the way we digest, the way we uh, ingest these ideas will be different from one another. So find the method that works for you. And hopefully your faculty or your professor would be amenable to these arrangements.
Although we don't have direct effect on the grades, but I suppose career services is there to be able to for students to channel also their reflection, as it is also a leadership capacity or capability to have some experience something, reflect on it, and reflect on what could have been done better or and what could be done to improve uh, succeeding chances. So that's one part for those who, let's say, are very finding it quite difficult to balance things out. And always for us, the North Star is the goal, right? What is the career goal or the intention post, say, in the long run, post the undergraduate program? So we know that it's still towards that direction, regardless of the ups and downs along the way. And the resilience will be built through that. And we can also see how students are able to practice also their determination, how badly they want something based on also going back to your point on the motivation. Yeah, and having clarity of that motivation and that North Star goal, and never giving up, trying to achieve something, even if something like intended is not there at the onset, but the idea of being determined will eventually get that person or student to achieve their goal. And one more point to, I like what you mentioned about students coming back and saying, how can my grades improve? I think it's a very good early start practice of negotiation skills and finding the value. I think I can add value by putting this up front, and then also just giving that no holds barred feedback from faculty mentors and the like of what would be realistic at this point in time.
So rather than competing with each other, being able to compare scores, try to lift each other up. And the funny thing is that we see this in our third years, right? And we're seeing it in your batch as well, second years. And I think the program is designed in such a way where we'll really hammer that realization uh, on you, right? That as you go through the
I
courses,
I think we have a term for that. Called trauma bonding.
but the thing is, yet we have that structure where we really try to encourage you to collaborate, right? So that's why we, especially for me as someone who's been teaching in the program from the initial conceptualization up until now as an APD, I see the growth of students in terms of the way they look at their peers, either first as a competitor and now as a support group.
So, Prof. Gino is not only our APD, but he's currently teaching our cohort, which is this batch 2028. He's currently teaching our cohort Machine Learning 1. We just had a midterm. So, Prof, what can we do that will show you our effort so we can get a better grade?
We still have the finals, so review for the finals first.
Okay. So, what is this called? I think to wrap up this very lengthy, very interesting conversation that delved into a lot of different pathways that I was not expecting.
This is just props.
It really is just props. Like we went into an entirely different tangent. But I think that when it comes down to it, with especially with what the two of you have said, it's really about maintaining a balance. Not only with your grades across the different subjects, but also in the things you do outside of it that will build you to be a better student.
So Miss Jade, Prof. Gino, obviously thank you for being here. What is your final takeaway from this conversation?
Again, going back to the thesis of this to this podcast, right? Grades are important, right? It will serve as an entry point for you to leapfrog over certain barriers, certain challenges at the start of your career, but it's not an assurance of success, right? At the end of the day, you need to have good skill sets. You need to have proper backing in terms of showing who you are as an individual, as an expert, or as an employee, or as a data scientist.
The intentionality also. I think that's a quite a used word now, but there's heart and truth to it that when you intentionally attempt to achieve a certain goal, and you're able to do that as early as when you are in your undergraduate level, whether it's on the aspect of grades and of your growth, because you see yourself different now from when you started, right? Those things you can really bring into when you're stepping in the real world, the world of work, and when you're starting to contribute already to society, to the economy, and the like. So the grades are important, foundational, confidence builder, and not just for you, but for the employers to see. Because how can they trust you when they don't know you first? So these are like tangible proofs for them. But as soon as you step in there as well, having gained that initial confidence to maintain and even surpass that confidence in the eyes of the people we would work for is something that you yourself will already carry with you and something you learn from the institution.
Wow. Thank you so much for those words, Prof. Gino and Miss Jade. This has been a wonderful conversation, and we hope to hear from the two of you again soon.
So, do grades still matter? Yes, they do.
They reflect discipline, consistency, and the ability to perform within a system. But they are not the full story.
Because beyond that transcript, what truly shapes your path is the skills you build and the problems you solve, and the initiative you take to grow beyond what's required.
Grades may open doors, but it's what you do beyond them that determines how far you go.
This is Unmute, where we say the things that people don't always talk about but need to hear. Oh, I'm Nandana.
And I'm Megan, and we'll see you in the next episode of
Forgot my
Unmute.
name.